Welcome to week 3 of the course. This week we're going to be exploring program development, and this week part 1 of your proposal is due. You're going to have parts 1, 2, and 3, so this is what we'll be working on for the rest of the semester. So after reading this week's readings, you should be very familiar with the different components of a grant proposal, how to describe the process of program development, and then how to create and develop a logic model, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in this video. So those are the objectives for week 3. One of the discussion questions is going to be you simply posting your part 1 in that discussion. So that includes your statement of need, your goals and objectives, and your logic model. So I'm going to come to that piece just secondly. The second discussion question is on identifying prospective funders. So there's a number of websites that I want you to look at for this week, and just 2 or 3 search engines provided in Campus Cruiser. And then I want you to identify, if you were able to get a grant, what would be the ideal program that you have in mind for the organization that you're focusing on, and what online resource may be the one that actually houses that grant opportunity. So, for example, the Walmart Foundation offers grants called State Giving Program. And so the purpose of the grant is to focus on hunger relief, food insecurity, nutrition, SNAP outreach, food pantries, things like that. So the downside, if you will, is that that grant is only available in 31 states. So, for example, it may or may not be applicable to you and your program depending on where you're located, which is why the context of your organization is always so important. So take a look at those websites, kind of think through what the grant is that you would want to apply for, what you want to expand within the organization, and then identify which one you may apply for. Then I also want you to talk about whether or not the process was easy to follow. Oftentimes it might be an interesting process, but not very easy to follow. And so I want to hear your thoughts about whether or not it was easy to perform your research on either your research by the services that you want to offer or by the facility that you're trying to address. Excuse me one second. So generally, seeking out an appropriate grant for your organization is a lot of work. You may or may not find it in the 3 sites that have been provided, and maybe you go to other sites beyond what we've given you. But it requires a lot of research. It requires you verifying if your organization meets certain eligibility criteria, the cycle schedule, program funding, whatever the organizational exclusions are. And then according to some program guidelines, an agency can apply during certain distinct cycles and then not during others. So, taking all of that into consideration is important. And then if you, let me just see something. Yeah, and then just explaining what issues you ran into during your search. If you get a chance to talk to someone at your agency about your grant search, that would be great and really great to put into your post. So just keep that in mind as well, but that's not required. Response posts for this identifying a prospective funder is not required. It's encouraged, but you don't have to respond. You don't need a response post for that particular one. Now let's jump back to part 1 of your budget proposal. So this is a statement of need, goals and objectives, and a logic model. And that is going to be your initial post due by Thursday. Your response post is going to be you responding to your peers, giving them thoughtful feedback about their statement of need, their goals and objectives, and their logic models. So for your introduction and the statement of need, you should be talking about the summary of the need and the proposed solution in a paragraph. So what the unmet need is of the organization, a little bit more of the description of the organization, and you already started that if you're staying with the same organization as week 2. what the organization wants to do. So do they want to expand on a particular program, create a new program, and the purpose or the goals of that, what the objective of the program is as a whole, or of this new component that you're trying to apply the grant for, and then who's going to benefit from that is really important to offer in the introduction. The second part is empirical evidence. So this is really important, that you're using citations, you're using current literature, and you're demonstrating how this need is supported by data. So is this, I'll just use food insecurity because I mentioned that earlier. What are the rates of food insecurity in the state, for example? How can you support why your local jurisdiction or region might need this particular service in the organization that you're focusing on? And then the next section after empirical evidence is organizational context. So why would your agency be the ideal agency for this new or expanded program to exist? So again, you're making the case for why shouldn't it be the organization down the street that applies for this grant and gets it? So it addresses the organizational context and why your organization is the right place to be. And then lastly, you're going to restate your statement of need. So that should just be kind of like your pitch, something that you can say in a couple of sentences, what the problem is, what the action is that you want to take, which is, what you want to seek these grant funding for, and what the intended solution is meant to be. Then for your goals and objectives, so this is important. Most students end up kind of redoing this section. Your goals and objectives need to be measurable. So for example, if maybe one of your goals might be to identify families within the community that need this particular service. You want to be a bit more specific than that and say what an actual activity would be. So the goal might be to identify 15 families per week or 25 families per month. So you want an actual number that you can measure and a time frame. So please keep that in mind. That will allow you to go back. So let's assume that you've gotten this grant, you've started to plan and implement, and then you can go back and evaluate. Did I actually reach 25 people every month? What were the barriers that I experienced? Maybe you reached more than that. How did you do that? Things like that. So you want to make sure that they're measurable, and that they have an associated timeline. So again, that you can look back and see, did you accomplish your goal within X number of days, months, years? Finally, the logic model, and you will read about this, includes your inputs, your outputs or activities, your activities, your outputs, which is a separate section, and then your objectives or your outcomes. So if you have questions about the logic model, again, your objectives and outcomes should be measurable. They may be very similar to what you have already stated in your goals and objectives, and that's fine. But what that allows you to do is really flesh out, what do you need to get this done? What do your inputs need to be? It could be staff. Maybe you need clients to assist you. Maybe you need a facility or the equipment or the time that you need. All the things that you'll be putting into the process to make a particular objective or goal happen. Then your throughputs or your activities are the actual activities or actions that you need to take. So maybe you need to train staff on a certain process. Maybe you need people to complete a certain form in order to get the service. Maybe you need to call and request a quote on, if you're expanding a new kitchen, then you need a quote on the new cabinets and the cost for the remodels. So the actual activities that you'll be doing. The outputs are what will occur once you are you've completed your inputs and your outputs. So for example, you would be able to access emergency food in the food pantry, or as a result of your activities, you'll be able to categorize more properly, or you'll be able to establish certain policies and guidelines now that X is in place. And then lastly, your objectives or your outcomes are the long-term, short and long-term outcomes of how people would benefit. So perhaps people will temporarily be able to get access to benefits for the next month, or meet some sort of demand that they have. All right. So please remember to cite the references that you use as you are moving through the statement of need, particularly for the evidence section, but really anywhere where you are using thoughts that are not your own. So please keep that in mind. Also, just a reminder on the time, your initial posts are due by Thursday. Your response posts, when required, are due by Sunday. If you are having challenges with these deadlines, please get in touch with me in advance. If you have questions about the assignment or any of the readings, please also get in touch with me, and we'll talk through your ideas and make sure that you're clear before you turn in any assignments. That is all I have for week 3. I really look forward to seeing your program proposals, part 1. I know that you guys are going to do great with identifying unmet needs and being able to actually write that statement now. So I'm just looking forward to seeing what your the process that you went through for looking for grants and what your ideas are for what you want to expand. So this is an exciting point in the semester where you really start to build out your ideas. I look forward to seeing your papers.